Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's talk. I'm really delighted to welcome you all this evening. Thank you for taking some time out of your day, or if you're watching online from the link that's been sent out, thanks for taking some time over the weekend to watch. My name's Stuart Murphy. I'm one of the assistant principals in the senior school. And tonight's quite a special evening for me. I'm actually, for the first time, having been present at this talk with Peter Cowley for well, we think 5 years now. I am now officially in the demographic of a parent watching this talk with my son in year 5 at the Boys Prep. So I won't take too much of your time, other than to say that Peter's going to talk for about an hour, and I can honestly say that pretty much everything I learned about keeping my son safe on the internet has come from sitting in on Peter's talks over the last 4 to 5 years, and his advice has been absolutely invaluable for me as a dad, as someone who really didn't know where to start with keeping his young person safe online. So I do hope that you get at least as much as I've gotten out of these talks over the last few years. And thank you again for taking the time. So I'm going to hand over to Peter Cowley. And Peter is the lead advisor for online services and safety for Achieving for Children. And they're basically our safeguarding partners within the Borough of Kingston. And he very kindly speaks to our parent body each year to help them help you understand how you can keep your children safe online between years 5 and up to 9 on this talk this evening. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Stuart. I am humbled and very much gratified by that introduction. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. I really must get you down as a referee at some stage. Right, let's crack on, everybody. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. Let me throw you in at the deep end. If you know what that is, you'll know what to do. It's a QR code. So if you happen to have a phone on you, that can read QR codes, just scan that, and that will take you to all of the resources that I put together in one place for you, including this presentation itself. Don't worry if you don't do QR codes, because there's a shortcut to all the same information. So if you simply pop that into any web browser, so it's bit.ly, I know it looks like a 1, but it's an L, bit.ly /SecSafe, all lowercase, all one word, will get you to the same stuff. And amongst other things, you'll find a folder with some information sheets in it for parents about various apps and so on that are on our radar. Also a few other handouts, and as I say, also a PDF of this presentation itself. So all the significant screens are in it, slides rather are in it, and you can, most of them are sort of actively linked to other stuff. So tap on something and the chances are pretty good that it will take you to something else. So one way or another you're covered. Should we get any late arrivals, Stuart, I'll do it again at the end. So one way or another, you can access all the information. Now, I know you're all busy people, so if you do need to dip out, I won't be offended. But of course, now at least you know, if you've got that link, you've got access to all the information that you need. So let's crack on then. So online safeguarding, I've broken it down into 2 main areas in effect, which is protecting the devices that they use and then protecting themselves. So the first half is sort of proactive stuff, the things you can do to prevent some of the issues that we'll look at in the second half ever actually arising. So in terms of their devices, obviously I'll want to talk about apps, smartphones and tablets, but also games consoles, because they all connect to the internet, of course, even the small handheld ones. And finally, in the first half, some pointers to how you can set up your home broadband to be a little bit more safe and secure, but without stopping anything that you might want to be able to do for yourselves. So that's protecting their devices. When it comes to protecting themselves, well, I want to talk a little bit about once they start experimenting, connecting to other people, chatting with other people, interacting with them, some areas around online contact and streaming that we've got some issues with, a few little potential things to look out for in terms of some emerging technologies. Also, what they're sharing about themselves, but also just as importantly, what other people might be sharing about them, and you'll see what I mean a little bit later on, and also a few little pointers to how you can encourage them to be a little bit better, possibly at managing their social media use. Okay, so let's crack on then. When it comes to protecting their devices, the number one top tip I have for you that Stuart will have heard year in, year out, but it never kind of changes, is basically, in a nutshell, set the parental safeguards before they get anywhere near the device. So in an ideal world, before they've got near it, if it's, say they're getting it for Christmas or for a birthday or some other celebration, before they get anywhere near that device, get it out of the box, plug it in, switch it on, and follow the maker's instructions for how to set up those parental safeguards, because all these devices have them, the capability built in, but of course they're always switched off because adults, of course, buy the device in the main. So what you've got to do is get it out of the box, plug it in, switch it on, and set them up. Now, to help you with that, this is probably the most useful single file in that device I gave you at the in that link I gave you at the beginning, actually. And here on one sheet of paper, if you print it onto paper, or on one screen, if you're looking at it on your device, is how to set up the parental safeguards on pretty much anything that they might come anywhere near. So from left to right, we've got Apple, Android, Kindle Fire, Xbox, Nintendo, Sony, PlayStation. Now, if you're looking at it on your phone or a tablet or, or even on a laptop, if you tap or click the appropriate icons there, it will take you to the maker's website and the parental help section, and will show you stage by stage how you can set up the parental controls. If you're looking at it on paper, or indeed your screen's good enough, you could scan the QR codes in the same way that we did at the beginning and get to the same information. Now, there'll be lots of common features in terms of the sorts of parental safeguards you can set up, but at a minimum, you will obviously want to tell the device how old the child is who's using it, or the children if there's more than one. I would also suggest that you set up the device so that they themselves cannot download any apps or games, which doesn't mean, of course, they can't have any, because it would be a very boring device. If they can't have any apps or games, no point in them having it, really. But you should be the gatekeeper, you see. You should be the one who's deciding what is and is not appropriate for them. Now, of course, sometimes they may ask you about something that you've never heard of, and so you might think, well, I don't know, I've no idea whether that's appropriate or not. Hold that thought. I'll come back to it in a couple of minutes. Other things you probably want to do is set up the device so that they can only connect to your broadband at home. They can't connect to the chap's broadband next door, even if they happen to know what his password is. And also remember, if it's a device that's got 3G, 4G or 5G access, so obviously a phone or some tablets that have mobile access, make sure that you're following the mobile providers' parental safeguard settings as well, which are likely to be a bit different, but they're going to be more or less equivalent. So get that all set up. Or of course, obviously as well, make sure they can't spend any money against the credit card linked to the account without your permission. Once you've got all that set up, protect those settings with a nice strong password that only you know, and obviously isn't the same as the unlocking code for the device, and then let them have it. And trust me, you're going to avoid a lot of other problems happening further on down the line. Now, I do realise that if they've already got it and they've got used to the idea that it's theirs and it's their property and it's private to them, you may have a little bit of a battle on your hands. But trust me, if you can get at it in order to set up the parental safeguards appropriately, you are going to avoid a lot of knock-on effects further on down the line. Okay, so set up those parental safeguards before they get anywhere near it. Now, next on my list is minimum age ratings, particularly on video games and apps. Okay, these are the sorts of things that you still get on disc for games consoles, although increasingly they're these massive downloads that take ages to come down over your broadband. But one way or another, they're the same sort of thing. Now, they all have age ratings, and by far the most common system is the PEGI age rating system that goes from 3 years up to 18 years. 3 and 7 we're not bothered about. They're sort of a U certificate, if you like. But 12, 16 and 18 do have legal teeth. It's a criminal offence for a retailer to give access to a 12, 16 or 18 rated product to any children or young people below those ages. But unlike, say, perhaps a bottle of whiskey or a packet of cigarettes, it isn't a criminal offence for an adult to purchase it on the child's behalf, which it obviously is for alcohol or cigarettes, but it isn't for games. Maybe it will be one day, but it isn't at the moment. So that means that there's a risk of an awful lot of children well under the age of 18 in particular accessing some products that are really not appropriate for them. Now, I do understand by the time they get to middle and late teens, you've kind of, lost the battle, really. You might as well, frankly, let them get on with it. It's sometimes easier just to swim with the tide, but faster. But I'm talking about the ones who are substantially younger than 18 here, who shouldn't be accessing products that are, just that's not appropriate for them. I mean, a good example would be Grand Theft Auto. I know it's the one we tend to wheel out as the usual suspect for these sorts of events, but trust me, you don't want a child who's well under the age of 18 anywhere near it. Quite apart from the language in it, there's also quite a lot of activity, such as, say, dealing in Class A drugs, pimping prostitutes, quite a lot of violence in it, violent acts, in fact, that you have to perpetrate in order to be able to progress in the game. So, for instance, there's one bit where you can't progress unless you strap this chap to a chair, get a pair of pliers and pull out all of his teeth. Or there's another bit where you similarly, in order to get information out of someone, you attach his genitals to a car battery. So you see where we're going with this. You don't want young children anywhere near it, obviously. Now, the beauty, of course, of setting up those parental safeguards is that even if somebody lends them a copy and they sneak up into their bedroom when you're not looking and they pop it in their Xbox or whatever, it's just going to spit it straight out again because it knows that they're, say, 10 and not 18. So you see how you can avoid so many of these problems further on down the road by setting up those parental safeguards. Now, I do know that it gets a little bit more fluid when we're talking about other sorts of apps, particularly social media apps. And certainly, by the time they got anywhere near 13, again, that particular genie left the bottle ages ago. You'll know that 13 is the most common watershed for these apps and games. I mean, here's a typical selection of ones that many of them will have, and indeed will want if they're not old enough. You'll see 13 is the most common age. There's nothing legally enforceable about that, you understand. These are just minimum ages specified by the makers. Notice that WhatsApp is a bit of an outlier there. It's a 16. More about why WhatsApp's a 16 in a couple of minutes, but 13 you'll see is the common one. Now, if your child isn't 13, I wouldn't attempt to try and lecture you about whether these products are appropriate or not for them. Mainly because you know your child and I don't. So if you have enough information to be able to come to a decision about, well, okay, they might not be quite 13, but actually I don't see why they shouldn't have, whatever, then fine. Because as I say, I don't know your children, you do. But what I would say is make sure that you have enough information available to be able to make a secure decision about that. And one of the best sources of information is this site, which is a guide to apps, the sort of apps that children all want, and some of which they definitely shouldn't have. And you as a parent can search it and look for real comments from real parents about what they think the minimum age ought to be. And then you can come to, an informed decision about it. And what I would say is when you come to that decision, stick to it. So don't allow yourself to be undermined, either by other parents or indeed by children themselves. So don't take any notice of things like, everyone else has got it. Because after all, we used to say that, didn't we, when we were kids, and it wasn't true when we said it, and it's no more true nowadays. And if you end up in a stand-up row with them, I hate you, and all this sort of stuff, yeah, well, I think the best answer to that is, yeah, well, I love you, and that's why I'm not letting you have it. We'll have a conversation about it in a year's time when you're a bit older, but for now, you're not old enough, you're not having it, end of. Yeah, and you know what? Don't feel insecure in that decision, and I tell you why. Because you'd be surprised how often they actually want you to say no. They'll never admit it, but they'll sometimes, especially on social media products, they'll see their friends getting up to all manner of things in social media, and they'll sort of think, well, that doesn't look like a very sensible thing to me. I don't think I particularly want to do that. But of course, they can't wimp out in front of their friends. So you are their perfect excuse, because they can then say, well, yeah, I want to do it as well, but my dad's rigged my tablet so I can't install it or whatever, or I can't access that website. See, you become their get out of jail free card, so to speak. So don't be put off by that. Stick to your guns. And they, in the end, you never know, they might actually thank you when they're old enough to admit that you were right all along. So stick to your guns on that one. Now, I promised a quick word. Why is WhatsApp rated 16? Well, the main reason it's rated 16 is that you cannot stop complete strangers contacting your child. They can block them after it's happened the first time, but of course the damage might have been done by then. So you can't stop complete strangers contacting them. Also, it's end-to-end encrypted. What that means is that any information when it leaves the origin device, be it text, voice, pictures, whatever, is scrambled in such a way that nobody, not even WhatsApp, and certainly not the police, can unscramble it until it's got to the other end, which makes it very, very difficult to track and trace anything. If it escalated to the police being involved, it makes it very, very difficult for them to be able to investigate a case. Also, if you're on WhatsApp, you will know very well that your phone number is visible to any other group members of groups that you are also a member of. So, of course, that mobile number could be passed on to other people, or could be used for other purposes, such as obviously making a voice call and so on. And a final concern we've got is disappearing messages, which is something that WhatsApp, the rumor is that WhatsApp are going to move to be more in line with some other products that also have disappearing messages. The idea is you can set an expiry time on a message. At the moment in WhatsApp, the minimum expiry time is 24 hours, which is actually fair enough. But on some products, it's as low as 5 seconds. And if they go for that, then there's a real risk that you may end up in a situation where your child may get sent something that's really, really nasty, horrible, even traumatizing. But before they've had a chance to show you as an adult, it's disappeared off the device. And not only that, but any evidence that it was even sent in the first place has also disappeared. So that's another concern. But in the main reason why WhatsApp is rated 16 is because it's not possible to stop complete strangers contacting your child. Excuse me. Do bear with me for a moment. Just I'm going to have to. Gosh, I'm sorry about that. I should have muted, shouldn't I then? Really, I do apologise. Anyway, never mind. I'll try and remember next time. Now, when it comes to web filtering on your broadband at home, you'll probably know if you're with one of the big providers that they have a sort of family-friendly filter, which by default is generally turned on, which is supposed to block all the nasty stuff. But many parents end up switching it off, not because they wanted to look at a load of nasty stuff, but often the filters are terrible. They don't block stuff that they should block, and sometimes they block things and you think, why did it block that? So out of frustration, many parents switch it off. But of course, if you do switch it off and you haven't done the top one there about setting the parental safeguard, you're back to square one again, aren't you? Because it means they can look for anything. So you probably will want to look at some sort of other things that you can include. Now, if you're with one of the top 3 providers, and the chances are fairly good that you are, from left to right there, we've got Virgin, BT and Sky. If you tap the appropriate box there for your provider, it will take you to their website and the parental help section. In some cases, there's software you can download for free as a part of your subscription, but at the very least, it will have advice and guidance for parents about how to set things up a bit safer. And that, again, is fine as far as it goes. But if you want a little bit more control than that, there's another couple of products that I can recommend as well. The one on the left there, OpenDNS Family Shield, is completely free of charge. And it works basically, in a nutshell, it replaces a core function of your broadband with providers with their version, which is called DNS. Don't worry too much about it, but it's domain name service. You probably know that that computers and indeed the internet deal in numbers rather than words, whereas humans tend to deal in words. So let's say if you were going to look at some news, you might go to news.bbc.co.uk, which you might type into a web browser. But happening in the background, without you necessarily being aware of it, is your domain name service is turning news.bbc.co.uk into a set of numbers which the internet understands. Now, why am I bothering to mention this? Well, because by replacing your own broadband company's DNS with OpenDNS, it introduces another layer of checking. So now OpenDNS Family Shield can check, because you've already told Family Shield what devices you have in your house, who predominantly uses them, and how old they are. So if it knows that somebody's upstairs in their bedroom trying to look on their iPad at something that's way too old for them, it simply won't let them. And if you've got somebody in the house, let's say, who's very good at deleting their web browsing histories, that won't work either with OpenDNS Family Shield. It keeps a central copy of everything that everybody's looked at, and you as the administrator can go in and check to see who's looked at what, how many times, how long for, and so on. However, what I would say is if you've got any older teenagers in the house, make sure they know. because you can avoid, a few awkward conversations then. Yeah. And also, you see, if they think you're spying on them, then you'll lose any sort of trust. Make sure they understand that if you're using something like this, you're not spying on them. It's because you're trying to keep an eye on a younger brother or sister in the house, and just to make sure that they're staying safe. Okay, so make sure they understand you're not spying on them. Now, the service on the right there, Custodio, that works in a totally different way. It's actually an app which is designed to be installed onto mobile devices. Although you can use it for free, to get any sensible use out of it, you do need to pay a subscription. It's not a fortune. The last time I looked, I think it was £3.95 a month for up to 10 devices. That will cover up to 10 devices in the household, which should cover most use cases. And it'll do a lot of the stuff all the other things do, like it can do things like give you little reports on how long they've spent doing this, that and the other. If you've got a young person who's so obsessed, let's say, with a particular website or game that you're worried that it's actually interfering with normal life, you can set a quota. So maybe if they try playing it for more than an hour a day, it'll simply cut them off. It won't let them. Or maybe you've agreed that they do their homework between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. You can set it so that they can only access educational resources or log into the school resources. They can't play games with their friends. Or maybe no internet after 9 o'clock, and so on. It can also do some quite good monitoring, proactive monitoring. So if you're worried perhaps that a child in your household might be, I hope they never are, but they might be, say, bullied or being bullied online, or somebody might be saying other horrible or nasty or unacceptable things to them. If it spots any such conversations, suspect dialogue that goes above a certain threshold that you can set, actually, then what it will do is, if it notices that in whatever app they're using, it will take a snapshot covertly of the offending dialogue, turn it into a snapshot, turn it into an attachment, and then email it to you as evidence. But again, we're back to the older teenagers. If you've got any, make sure they know, because, we all said things to our friends, didn't we, when we were teens, that there was no safeguarding issue. It was just kids being kids. And I think we need to respect that, because after all, older teenagers have had a pretty rough time the last 2 or 3 years, what with, one thing and another. So I think we need to respect that and make sure they know that you're not trying to catch them out. You're not trying to spy on them. You're just looking after some younger siblings in the household. Now, if you do install any product like this, however, and you're having difficulty following the instructions, whatever you do, don't fall into the trap that this family fell into.
What's it supposed to do?
It's cyber-vigil software. It blocks your children from inappropriate websites.
Yeah, but I can clone that off Oscar's mum's computer.
Yeah, well, I decided to buy it rather than steal it.
It's so weird.
So, quick cup of tea, anyone? I'm making.
Do we really have to bother with this cyber-visual thing?
Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
100%.
Why?
Because as responsible parents, we need something to defend this family from the dark and dangerous tentacles of the internet.
That's right.
Except we need you to install it, because we can't make head or tail of it.
Yeah, don't let him anywhere near it, whatever you do, of course, because he'll have the power then, right? So if you really can't figure it out, get a family friend to help you. So in summary then, can't emphasize enough by a long way the top one there. Set those parental safeguards before they get anywhere near the device. Number 2, heed those minimum age ratings, particularly on video games and apps, and be guided by the age ratings for other apps and games. Take a view as a parent, whether it's, even though they might not be quite old enough, because after all, there's a certain social stigma attached these days to children who aren't allowed anywhere near any of these things. And sometimes I think it's just easier to swim with the tide, but faster. And yes, install web filtering, but don't just rely on whatever the network provider might have. You might need to add a few other whistles and bells. Now, quickly want to mention, if they've got a phone, getting a phone or whatever, you might be looking at different phone contracts. But I think the important one is about behaviour, the stuff they get up to. And this is a sort of collation of advice and guidance from different sorts of little mini phone contracts that are suggested sometimes between parents and their offspring. You can take a view on whether some of these statements might be worthwhile incorporating into a little custom-made contract of your own. So here are some statements which I think you can take a view on. This is our phone, not yours. We're letting you use it because we trust you to be sensible. If we call you, you must answer, or call us straight back if you miss the call. Now, good luck with this one. We will know your phone unlock code and you must tell us if you change it. We may check the phone at any time, but we will respect your privacy too. And of course, you take an age, a sliding scale of age to that particular bullet. You will not use the phone at meal times or after X PM, whatever you decide, age appropriate. And of course, most importantly, if they receive anything suspicious or worrying, tell us and we'll sort it out together. So just a few suggestions and pointers of things to set up a sort of understanding about the sorts of use that they may be putting their brand new shiny phone to. Now, can't get too far in terms of behavior without talking about TikTok, because it's absolutely everywhere. A few interesting statistics for you. Believe it or not, now more than 1 in 10 of the world's population is on TikTok. It's rated 13 plus, of course, as we well know. But we've talked about that already. Now, this is some figures from Ofcom back in 2020, and probably they would have done the research just before COVID. So even then, almost half of 8 to 12-year-olds were on TikTok, even though, of course, none of them are supposed to be. And now it's going to be over half. Definitely over half of 8 to 12s are actually on it. Have you heard of a rainbow puke or a drama queen? These are little incentives that you can purchase inside TikTok and use them as ways of gifting other people. So you turn real money into these incentives and then you can gift them to other people and they can then turn it back into money at the other end. After TikTok have taken their 40% cut, I should say, but one way or another, it's a way of transferring money within TikTok. So for instance, it's sometimes used by social influencers, social media influencers who might say things like, maybe they're a minor musician or something, and they might say, send me a rainbow puke and I'll give you advanced access to a track off my next album or something like that. Yeah. And now they start at about £1, these incentives, but they can go up to well over £100. So you will definitely want to double check that you've switched off in-app purchasing on their device so you don't get a nasty shock on your credit card bill at the end of the month. And unfortunately, this gifting, not just within TikTok, but other sorts of apps as well, has been used and is being used to try to persuade young people to take part in various activities online that otherwise they might not do, because of course with a cash reward being offered as well at the end. And unfortunately, as I say, this is being used to coerce young people into doing things that they might not necessarily feel comfortable engaging in. Now, in response to international outcries, actually, sometimes about the things that you do hear about getting up to on TikTok, it is true that TikTok have introduced really rather good quality parental restrictions. So for instance, it's possible now to restrict who can see your child's profile within TikTok. You can also see the videos that they're ticking to say that they like, and you can also restrict the search terms that they can put in terms of types of topics and subjects that they can search for. And if you'd like a little bit more information on that, this is a link to a splendid company called Inique, who operate out of Belfast, and this is a link to their safety centre, and you can search through literally hundreds of documents and little short videos to explain how to set up some of these parental safeguards in a whole range of different apps. So I can commend that to you as well. Now, one aspect of behaviour we do have concerns about in terms of TikTok use is well, we do for younger ones as well, but also for the not so young ones in terms of how relatively easy it is to gain access or to be accessed by other people online who they may not necessarily know face to face. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And with that in mind, I've got a little clip from a Panorama broadcast of a couple of years ago, and although it is a couple of years old, it's still very current in terms of in terms of what it addresses, and it's about how relatively easy it is to be contacted inappropriately by older people. So take a look at this.
Since April, only accounts registered to users aged 16 or over can send or receive direct messages. But what if children lie about their age? We decided to test the app. This is our newest team member, a journalism graduate who creates TikToks for an internet search company. She's 23, but is posing as a 14-year-old. To make her look the part, we ran her pictures through photo editing software. Every day, she posted videos copying popular dances to tracks like this.
I would just try post as regularly as possible, like a 14-year-old would. Really harmless, innocent videos.
For 3 weeks, she took part in all the trends popular with TikTok's youngest users.
I didn't do any of the explicit dancing or anything. I used hashtags like hashtag school life, hashtag school uniform.
Talk me through the response you got.
After about a week or so, I got followed by a profile picture just of a naked torso. That was the first strange thing. Then the videos were picking up more views and more people were following the account.
Many appeared to be older men.
And there's another one here. A man approached me saying he was 21 and I said I'm 14, and he kept continuing the conversation with me. He also continued to like loads of the videos and stuff like that.
What was his profile like?
A lot of the accounts he followed were mostly young girls. I saw that there was one as young as 7 there. And it's just strange to think that this is what they're using TikTok for.
The messages soon became much more disturbing.
One morning I woke up to a message on the account.
Okay, that is completely inappropriate.
The guy's 34.
He is saying he wants to show you a body part. He thinks you're 14, he's 34. That's not okay.
No.
That's sickening.
Yeah.
So I don't think that needs any further comment, really, does it? And of course, also, and I'm not particularly picking on TikTok, there's no effective age verification. So although chatting to other people and live streaming with other people is rated 16 plus, if you could be 8 and said that you're 16, and you will be believed. So there isn't at the moment any effective age verification. That's why, of course, you referred to some of the accounts that chat was following. There were as young as 7 that they were saying they were, which of course is way below the age that they're supposed to be accessing these products. Now, having thoroughly demonized TikTok, what I would say is try not to demonize a particular app or game. And there's another technology that's been bubbling under for a number of years now, but Apple any week now are set to enter the race big time in terms of VR, that's virtual reality and augmented reality products. And so I think there's going to be a big explosion in terms of VR content this year. The brand leader is still probably Oculus, but Oculus is owned by Facebook, and the new name for Facebook is Meta. It gets a bit complicated, doesn't it? This is what typical VR setup looks like, and this is what it looks like when it's worn. So you have this thing clamped to the front of your head, which gives you a pretty much these days, with the better devices, photorealistic 3D view of another world, if you like. Now, of course, you know you're not there because this thing's strapped to your head, but your brain is pretty much convinced that you are. So every movement you make, every gesture you do appears completely faithfully as if you are actually within this environment. And you have to try it to see what I mean, really. It's quite an interesting experience, and really quite absorbing. Huge educational possibilities too. But naturally, in terms of our focus today, I've got a little bit of concerns about some of the potential misuses of the technology. Now, Meta, new name for Facebook, have a product called VR Chat, where it's like a multi-user chat room environment, but you enter the room, so to speak, virtually with the VR kit on. So it feels as if you're actually in real rooms chatting with other people, all of whom, of course, have their own headsets on as well. But you don't see that. You see the characters that they're playing within the environment. There's another little BBC clip I've got for you from a news bulletin this time. And on the screen that's coming up, if you tap the still of the bulletin, it will take you to the BBC News site, and you can actually watch the whole thing and also look at some other information at the same time if you're should you be interested to know a little bit more. VR Chat, I should say, is rated 13 plus, so just keep that in mind while we look at some of the things that their reporter discovered whilst going in posing as a 13-year-old in this environment.
There are 2 people to the side of me now who are trying to get on top of each other. Okay, so there's like a group of people that are like simulating sex. I want to say there's like 5 of them.
Oh, hello, miss. We can hang out, watch a movie or something.
Isn't it school time right now?
Come on,
there's avatars, right? And these avatars can go naked.
Oh my god. Shoving a beer ball up all of the female characters, like in their private areas. Horrible. It was strange. It felt like it was happening to me. Stop it. Leave me alone.
That flat 2D representation can't give you the sort of visceral, if you like, feeling of what it would have felt like to that young woman. I mean, I don't want to get too prurient about it, but it would have kind of almost felt as if she were being violated. So you can see there's obviously quite a lot of shenanigans going on in some of these products that, well, certainly not appropriate for 13 plus, but probably not appropriate for anybody, let's face it. But there's some issues we've got about those products too. So make sure if they have VR products, do apologise. I thought I'd muted my, that was somebody trying to phone me. I thought I'd muted that. I do apologise. Where was I? Yes. Make sure that you're following the same parental safeguards for any products that they might be running on any VR kit as well, particularly, of course, because they're wearing it and you can't see what they're actually looking at. Now, as I say, having thoroughly demonized TikTok and now VR chat, try not to demonize a particular game or app. It tends to be counterproductive, and in fact it can even be worse than that, because it makes it acquire a bit of a mystique, you know. Remember the shenanigans a couple of years ago about Squid Game? Yeah, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, all number of schools would hold all school assemblies. I'm sure you never did this, so I'm certainly not picking on you guys. You know, bring all the children into an assembly and say, do not watch Squid Game. And what's the first thing, of course, they're going to do when they get home? Yeah. So try not to demonize a particular game or app. So what I did was I thought I'd choose a particular often demonized game and look at some of the general principles we can apply in general terms to keep children safer while they're online. And the one I've chosen is Fortnite. So let's have a look at some of the ins and outs of Fortnite. Now, first of all, I'm talking about Fortnite Battle Royale, which is the free, more about what free means in a minute, but the free multi-user version. There's up to 100 players, and the idea is that you're the last one left standing at the end, in which case you are the winner. Now, there isn't any blood or gore in it, you know, so it's not like Call of Duty, so you're not going to get blood splattered everywhere and limbs flying across the screen or anything. Of course, I can't assume you've ever seen anyone playing Fortnite, so let's have a little clip at somebody playing it so you get the idea.
Right, you know what? Hope you don't get shot in the back, but we're back in the ring again. Oh my gosh, jeez, my shoulders are actually hurting me. I've only been to his house like once before. I like to call it the haunted house. It's in the middle of the woods. It doesn't look like there's anyone here. Anyone's been looting here. Which is beautiful. We've got a shotgun here. Whoa! Oh my god, Evie, I'm so sorry. I scared the living poop out of both myself and Evie. I swear to God, they were sitting behind a box, just waiting for someone to come up, and it was me.
That personal observation actually looks quite fun to me, but there is a level of violence in it, as you can say. Personally, I think you see worse things in Tom and Jerry cartoons, but, you know, there is a level of that sort of violence. And in fact, that's the main reason why it attracts a PEGI 12 rating. So remember what that means. It's a criminal offence for a retailer to give access to Fortnite to any child below the age of 12. So you may have concerns about the violence. There's other concerns I would have too. So although I said it's free, like a lot of these games, which are free at the point of use, they are nevertheless put under quite a lot of pressure to spend money in the game. What happens is you turn real money into what they call V-Bucks, and then you can spend those V-Bucks on various enhancements in the game. None of which make any difference to how likely you are to win, of course. So, for instance, if you fancy your player in that snazzy red outfit there, that'll cost you about £15. You're not going to get a suit arriving through the post or anything. It literally is just a digital transformation to the character. And some of these, I'm told, these enhancements can get quite expensive. So you can buy these victory dances that if you are the winner, the last person standing at the end, that you get to do this sort of jig and a dance that everyone else has to watch you do. And some of those, I'm told, can be 40, 50, 60 pounds. So you will definitely want to triple check that you have indeed switched off in-app purchasing to make sure that you don't get any nasty surprises on your credit card. There's another concern you might have in a lot of these games, and Fortnite is no different, is that if they're playing upstairs in their bedroom, the chances are they've got the headset on with, you know, the headphones and the mic. And especially if there's older people in the game, the chances are pretty good that you're going to have quite a lot of effing and blinding going on. And if you've got concerns about the level of the language, then just don't let them use the headset for a bit. Make them go on speaker. They'll soon tone it down if they know the rents can hear what everybody's saying. So, you know, that's a way of, you know, quietly enforcing some discipline, if you like, in terms of what they're saying to each other. And a final concern in a lot of these products, and it's the same with Fortnite as well, is who are they actually playing against? Now, it's possible within Fortnite and a lot of these products for a parent to agree a sort of guest list, if you like, the people that are allowed to play the game with your child or young person, and so they don't get to play the game unless they're on that guest list. And there will be people that you'll agreed with the child. So, for instance, you know, classmates, maybe friends from other schools, cousins, even adults as well. If you know and trust them, that's different. You know, like Uncle Bob or whatever, that's fine, so long as you're happy about that. And not only that, but any participant in that particular Fortnite tournament cannot then join, you know, ask someone else to join unless they're still on that original list. Now, is it possible for a savvy enough child to go in and reverse those settings if they know what they're doing? Yeah, I suppose in theory it is. But as a mum said to me a few years ago, she said, you know, oh, I've done all of that. I've done all of those settings, but he just goes in and switches it off again. To which I said, well, don't let him play then. He's abused your trust. Yeah, there has to be a contract with these sorts of things, you know, a set of expectations. And if they break those expectations, don't let them play for 2 weeks. They'll soon get the message. Okay, so those general points apply to lots and lots of different sorts of social media and particularly games products that are out there. You know, we just need to enforce certain expectations in terms of how the children and young people interact with some of these products. Here are definitely some apps to be aware of. Which is ironic in a way, because some of these look really quite cutesy, don't they? Monkey and Bigo Live especially. All of these apps are rated 18 plus because they can all connect you to random strangers on the internet. In fact, that's their modus operandi. In the case of Omegle, actually, it's their advertising strapline. Their advertising strapline is "Talk to strangers!" ! That's the whole point of the app. But of course, there's a chance, a pretty big chance, of being connected to some inappropriate people out there. Now, of course, if you have set up the parental safeguards, there's no way they can get anywhere near these products. But you'll certainly want to make sure that they're not using any of these because of the high risk of them being contacted by highly inappropriate people. Now, another aspect of protecting themselves is when it comes to the information that might be being shared about them. This is a conversation sometimes I have with parents of children in sort of year 6 sort of age, as they're going into secondary school. So they might be moving to a bigger school. When they get new friends, the first thing that they will do, well, one of the first things they'll do is check out their new friends online. And if the first thing they come across is something like that, in the case of your daughter, let's say, well, they're doomed, aren't they? I mean, they're going to be cupcake for the next 2 years or whatever. Yeah. So that might be a cutesy little picture of your daughter that you'd totally forgotten about, but maybe Auntie Doris put up when she was tiny because she thought it was a cute little picture. But of course, when you're 12 or 13 or whatever, then that becomes different. Yeah. You can be particularly sensitive at that sort of age. So what I would say is, and this is going to sound a bit creepy stalky, but it is worth doing, is now and again, consider Googling your child. What I mean by that is put in some basic bits of information that someone who knows your child a bit would know about them. So things like their full name, what school they go to, how old they are, what street you live in, that sort of thing. No private information, of course, so nothing, certainly no passwords or anything secret. No. Only the sort of stuff that someone who knows them a bit would know about them. And you'd be surprised what might pop up in that search, particularly in the pictures. So it might be something like that, but it might be something that might be more concerning than something like that. But it doesn't just stop there, because for many young people, you can easily discover online a whole raft of stuff, such as obviously their full name, their birthday and their age. And obviously, if you put birthday and age together, you get date of birth. But do a bit more digging around, say particularly in grandparents' Facebook feeds that are publicly available. Of course, I'm not talking about stuff that's only available to the family group. That's different. I'm talking about stuff that anybody could find on the internet, which is why I said Googling them is a great way of finding this sort of information, because anybody could do it. Anybody in the world could do it if they knew those bits of information about your child. So do a bit more digging around, and the chances are you'll find things like the name of their first school, their favourite teacher, their first pet's name, their grandparents' names. And you might be thinking, so what? What about grandparents' names? Well, think about it. If you know somebody's grandparents' names, that probably means that you know their mother's parents' surname. And if you know their mother's parents' surname, that in turn probably means that you know their mother's maiden name, unmarried name. So mother's maiden name, first pet, favourite teacher, name of first school. Is this ringing any bells? It ought to be, because this is the sort of information you get asked, isn't it, if you've forgotten your password. Here's an example in Windows 10. In case you forget your password, what was your first pet's name? So there's a kind of minefield of information out there about some of your children that anybody, a complete stranger, could potentially find out. Now, sometimes it's things like, especially photos. So, for instance, obviously there shouldn't be any photos that the whole world can see of your child, say, in her school uniform, standing proudly outside the school gates. That's giving away personally identifiable information. Bad idea. But sometimes it can be apparently a totally innocuous sort of picture. So let's say you've got a nice picture of your daughter on a travel rug in the back garden with a little Labrador puppy. Sweet little picture, totally innocent, not giving away anything personally identifiable at all. However, if that picture was taken on a mobile phone, and the chances are 99% these days that it was, then the picture may well be geotagged with the location of where it was taken. And if that picture is available to the whole world, that means potentially 6 billion people now, if they know how to read that geolocation tag on your photo that's publicly available, can now work out to within about a 10-meter radius where your back garden is. Now, is that a problem? I don't know, but it might be. Yeah. So what I would say is, when you've Googled your child and looked for information and found stuff, if you find stuff that actually really shouldn't be available for the whole world to see, have a polite word with whoever put it up there, because it'll probably be grandparents, cousins and so on. And they do it with the best of intentions. They do it because they love your children and they want to celebrate all of their big life events and so on. But it could be putting them at risk. So make them take those private, so that it's only shared amongst the family group, who have every reason to see it, and so somebody like me, who has no reason to see it, can't see it at all. Now, there's a name for this phenomenon, rather unfairly actually. It's called sharenting, which is a bit of a shame, because it's not usually you guys who are the culprits. It's usually aunties, uncles and so on. Excuse me, but we need to put a stop to it, because it's not safe. It's potentially putting your child at risk. So in summary then, in terms of protecting themselves, last time I'll nag you, set those parental safeguards and make sure you've checked app settings, and particularly video game settings. Make sure that they're being adequately supervised but when they're going online, particularly if they're live streaming or doing some of the activities that we saw earlier. If something goes wrong, try not to go, ooh, because if they think you're going to go completely mad, they won't tell you. And of course, their number one fear might be that you'll take it away from them. So try to have a conversation with them, if you haven't already, along the lines of, oh, I know you love playing all of these games and chatting to all these people, and I don't understand some of the stuff that you get up to, but you seem to enjoy it. But if anything ever happened that you're not sure about, or worries or upsets you, for goodness sake, tell me, because I won't be cross, because I know that it won't be, you who's the culprit. It won't be you who's doing anything wrong. 2 fingers crossed there. But I know that it won't be you. So tell me, and between us, we can make it better. And if they know that's going to be your default response, they're much, much more likely to include you. And particularly as they get a bit older, through the teenage years, it gets harder to keep them in that circle of trust. So do emphasize to them, you're not trying to catch them out. If something goes wrong, you want to be able to help, because you want them to be happy and healthy users of the internet, because you love them. Now, also model good behavior yourself, I would say. So if you have a rule, let's say no handheld games consoles at the dinner table, then don't have your phone either. I don't care how important that message is that you're waiting for from work is, because in their world, whatever they were doing is just as important. Build their digital resilience. And what I mean by that is, actually, if you tap the underlined text there, it takes you to a really useful website that explains in general terms, headed up actually by Dr. Linda Papadopoulos, for whole age ranges, right from the tiny ones right the way up through to older teenagers. And it specifies very, very nicely about what are the norms, what are the sorts of things that I needn't get upset about if they're doing at this particular age, and what are the sorts of things that I might actually need to be concerned about. Fantastic set of resources there. Talk to them about their use of social media as well. And with that in mind, let's look at a little bit of recent evidence. In fact, this is stuff that I've stolen actually from Dr. Linda Papadopoulos. Well, not really stolen it, because I've given her the credit there at the bottom. And if you'd like more information about this, if you tap the white text there, it will take you to her website, which has got lots more information. Some quite interesting findings that she's been flagging up by doing a sort of trawl of the recent research. One consistent finding, however, is that heavy use of social media is linked to poorer mental health. But interesting, the operational definition of what heavy use is more than 2 hours per day. Well, show me a young person who uses social media for less than 2 hours a day. So they're all heavy users of it. But I wouldn't necessarily get too worked up about that. Some research from the Centre of Addictions and Mental Health in Canada, where they tracked 10,000 adolescents, found that for those who self-reported their mental health as fair or poor, they were more likely to be the heavy users. So that might sound like depressing news, but actually it's not really, because it means they recognise that there is a problem themselves. Heavy users are increasingly amongst young people recognising that it's something that they may need to get a grip on and handle better, more effectively. Now, one knock-on effect of overuse, and I stress overuse, not just use, overuse of social media is its potential effect on sleep. The fact that several studies are indeed linking sleep disturbance to screen time, the amount of spending on screen. And a recent bit of research by the BBC found that 10%, admittedly only 10%, but still 10% of teenagers actually set wake-up alarms on their device so that they would wake up a few times in the night to check to see who'd said what about whom to whom, because of this constant fear of missing out. I wouldn't let your child have their phone in their bedroom. Don't take any nonsense about, I need to charge it up. Well, okay, keep the charger downstairs then, and you can charge it up downstairs. And, I need it to wake up in the morning. Well, get them an alarm clock then. Okay, there's no reason why they need to have their phone in their bedroom. It's just not necessary. Also, these devices give out quite a bluish light, which is known to have a negative effect on sleep patterns. So, and of course, for adolescents, sleep is particularly important to the development of their brain. So with that in mind, most products these days have a facility wherein you can change the hue of the device that is giving out on screen from a very bluish sort of appearance to something that's much less so. Here's what it looks like on Apple devices. They have something called Night Shift, and if you activate Night Shift, it changes that bluish appearance to something that's more sort of yellow green and is reckoned to have a less deleterious effect on their sleep patterns. Also, there's an issue not just in terms of sleep, but also in terms of comparing what you're getting up to with what apparently other people are getting up to. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember Friends Reunited. Didn't social media used to be about connecting with other people? But it's not so much now, really, is it? It's much, much more now about comparing what you're doing with other people, that looking at this highly curated version of what other people are getting up to online and forming the conclusion wrongly that everyone else is having a fantastic time and your life is really, really dull. Now, research shows that most people, perhaps unsurprisingly, tend to, when they're putting stuff online, they tend to highlight the best stuff and miss out the boring stuff. Well, you would, wouldn't you? Although I do wish, to be honest, sometimes I wish my friends would do that a bit more. The number of posts you see, just going around the corner shop to get a pint of milk, LOL. And you sort of think, why are you telling me this? But anyway, on the whole, people tend to highlight, the best stuff and miss out all the boring stuff. But of course, also, the research shows that people are more likely to post stuff when they're on a bit of a high and look around to see what other people are doing when they're on a bit of a low. But of course, that makes you feel even worse then, because it sort of accentuates the apparent gulf between what your life is like and what other people's lives are like. But of course, it's not true. So what can we do about it? Well, one thing we can do is talk to young people about, is it actually valid constantly to seek approval from people that don't really know them? And in many cases, certainly don't know them face to face. Comparing what they're doing with this sort of highly curated version of what other people are getting up to, and forming the conclusion wrongly that their lives are, worthless, and they're disappointed in what they can do, or jealous of what other people are doing. And you'll sound like an old fogey when you say this, but make them see that it is important to get a good night's sleep after all. So encourage them to make informed choices about when to switch off at night, and maybe use some of the products we talked about in part 1 to enforce that for a bit, if you can't get them to cooperate about that. If they really are, sneaking down in, which sometimes happens, sneaking down in the middle of the night to find where you've put the phone on to charge, just to check up to see who said what about whom. And remind them, there are actually other ways of socializing, and help them to evaluate, whether they've actually got the balance right in their own lives too. Now, if you've got somebody who's going to turn 13 or has turned 13, you'd be surprised how many how many social media companies will let you reset your age. Now, this is important because we know they all lie about their age well under the age of 13 and say that they're 13 or maybe even 16 or 18. Well, the thing is that many social media companies will have a fairly strict set of safeguarding rules apply to an account that's between the age of 13 and 18. But of course, if they were 9 when they got onto social media and said they were 13, then those safeguards are going to be switched off when they're 14. Yes, because it'll think they're 18. So for most products, there's an opportunity to reset their age. And this is a handout, which it's not a handout, sorry. If you tap this screen, you can download this whole handout, which is quite useful. And for all the products that they'll use, will show them how they can reset their date of birth, but without losing anything that they've been getting up to on the product. So in other words, it can reset their age to how old they really are, which means those safeguards can continue to be applied up until they really are 18 years, when after all, that's it then. They're on their own, so to speak, in terms of being an adult on social media. Mention screen time 1 or 2 times. I don't want to go into it in any great detail, to be honest, because I think too much rubbish is spoken about screen time. Here's another handout with the link I gave you at the beginning from the UK Chief Medical Officer. If you have concerns about the amount of time your young person's spending in front of a screen, then that gives you sound common sense advice, things to be concerned about, things to really not be worried about at all. Other places to go for help. Well, if you come across something online that's not just, a bit like the cupcake picture we saw earlier, but actually is worse than that, something that really does need to be taken down. This is a one-stop shop for how you can report harmful content online. Tap the underlined text and it will take you there for pretty much any scenario and where to report it to, anonymously if you wish, because of course if you come across something that's really nasty, you don't necessarily want to be felt to be culpable. Although I will say the authorities are not interested in catching people who tell them about something that needs to get taken down. They're interested in taking down the people who put it up there in the first place. The Think You Know website, which is actually a police website, though it's heavily disguised, has excellent advice, not just for children and young people, but for parents too. Tap the underlined text and it will take you straight there. And the company called Inique that I mentioned earlier, here's a direct link to their safeguarding hub, which has excellent advice for young people, teenagers and parents and carers about how to set up the apps and games for maximum safety, but without spoiling anybody's fun. It's not about spoiling anybody's fun, it's about keeping the bad people out. Phew, I think I've just about brought it under the wire for an 8 o'clock cut off there, Stuart. So I hope that's been of some use. Thank you so much for staying so long, everybody. I've deliberately given you my email address there because if you've got any questions or concerns, then please do feel free to drop me a line, although I know you can drop them to the school as well. And I will do my best to get back to you. And if I don't know the answer to a question you've got, I will certainly see if I can find someone who does. But other than that, I would say thank you so much for being here and listening. Here, once again, is the link for any late arrivals. So that's a QR code you can scan to all of the information I've talked about, and the shortcut bit.ly/SecSafe will get you the same stuff. So I think I'll leave that up for a few moments, Stuart, but I'll shut up now and hand over back to you.
Yeah, just a huge thank you from me, actually, Peter. Once again, I've managed to learn something new, something that I didn't know before. Just for the sake of those parents who are watching at the moment, and again, anyone who's watching the recording, the link to a recording of this, plus a link to that you can see on the screen, and access to all the resources will be sent out via the MIS on Friday. So if you were interested in what you've learned and you think that it would be useful for your friends and other parents to know, please do recommend them taking the time to look at this talk. One of the biggest things I think I've learned over the years is that if all of the parents stick together and have the same sets of values and the same sets of rules about these sorts of things, it can make a huge difference. So please do, if you think you like what you heard, if you like the idea of control, having control over their apps and thinking about what time they're able to use their phones. Obviously, they won't be looking for messages from their friends if no one is sending them. So if you can get everybody to listen to the same recordings and access the same information, we really can help to make everyone just that little bit safer, while still allowing them, as Peter rightly says, to enjoy it. Because I think that was my big realization. I originally thought that maybe I could just stop these things from happening, but it was understanding that actually they live in a different world to us. I do see my son playing online, chatting to his friends on Friday evenings and at weekends, and he is having the equivalent of that idyllic childhood where you used to play with your friends in the street after school, which I certainly never had growing up in London. But he really does have that experience, and it's listening to Peter that has helped me set those things up. So please do recommend it, pass it on, and keep an eye on the MIS on Friday. But without further ado, I think that's it from us. So thank you again, Peter, for your time. We'll see you here next year, hopefully, where I'll learn some more new things as well. Thanks very much, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you. It's been a blast. Thank you so